I'm with Lee Shulman and Omar Victor Diop to talk about their book, The Being There, which I saw exhibited at Photo London recently, and to find out a bit more about this project and how it came about. So welcome, Lee and Omar, and thanks for joining me. I'd like to just start by probably an introduction to the Anoymous project and what yourself as Lee, perhaps you could, because this is your project, isn't it? This is the background to this whole thing.
Well, it's a project. I mean, the project itself being there is both our projects, so it's kind of like a real collaboration. So the Anonymous project I started in 2017, which is where I started collecting Kodachrome slides mostly from America, from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. So I basically built up this collection of family photos, found family photos that came from Kodachrome slides. And I kind of just bought I bought a box of slides online as a kind of memory of having kind of like slideshows at home with my parents, and kind of started sharing the images online, and it kind of took off from there. And people got interested with the images, which were they're really just like intimate family portraits of people in the 1950s and 60s, mostly from America and the UK as well, and a bit of Europe as well. And so the project kind of started that way. And then I started using the photos in exhibitions and started presenting the photos as a kind of a collective memory of images that I'd found, and started sharing them. And then I was invited to Arles in 2019 to create an exhibition. And as a filmmaker, which is my background, I started to use these images and kind of put them into sort of in exhibitions in a different kind of way. I wanted to see how we could look at photos differently. I kind of started creating work around the images, which kind of then took off, and I kind of did different kinds of exhibitions. But it's basically my paintbrush, so I kind of use these images as a sort of a stepping stone to create kind of new narratives around the family photography, which has always been very close to my heart.
So how many you've done books as well, haven't you? We've got to have some of the books.
Yeah, I'm a book junkie, which is kind of, and I'm on my 12th book, and I'm doing 2 new books this year. So I kind of like each book is really an exhibition itself in some respects, and creates different themes and different ways of exploring the collection. So that's kind of how it started. And then obviously when this project came about, I've always been someone who's quite collaborative in my work as a filmmaker. So my first major collaboration was about 2 years back with Martin Parr. I was so lucky to do a book with him, which was kind of gave me the taste of collaborative work.
So Omar, your background is in self-portraiture, isn't it? But not generally collaborative. That's right, isn't it?
Exactly. For me, it's the first. I haven't collaborated much with other artists, and this was a perfect opportunity to work on a new material. My subjects have always been revolving around the issues of memory, history, representation, but I've always built images from scratch, sometimes drawing inspiration from existing portraits, existing stories, but having the opportunity to jump into a ready-made image and create new content is something new to me.
So how did the idea come for working collaboratively on this project? What was it that made you think of working collaboratively with anyone, first of all, and then secondly with Omar particularly?
I've always been, as a filmmaker, that's collaborative work anyway. So I've always been comfortable with working with other people. I think that's sort of something I've always been. It's been in my thought process. Also, the idea of this kind of photography, which is very much about family and people sharing a moment. So it's always been that kind of style. So originally, the first collaborative project really came about when Magnum contacted me and wanted to work with me, and I'd met Martin Parr in Arles when he saw my show, and I'd realized that I had a lot of his images, similar images in my collection that were similar to his images, and so I put them together and sent them to Martin, and he sent me the shortest mail I think I've ever received in my life, which was just, he wrote the word yes in his mail, which is very Martin. And so we put the book together quite quickly, which was in the COVID period, and that was the first real collaborative process. And it kind of gave me the idea of continuing, which I've always loved to do. But this project itself was very, very different, because basically in this collection, which is from the 1940s and 50s and 60s America, obviously we're talking about an America that was very much segregated. And obviously that played on my mind a lot. And I was, and I kept on seeing these empty places, these chairs where the photographer had got up and taken the photo and left an empty space and a chair. And that gave me the idea. And I'd known Omar for a while, because we'd met on the sort of photo circuit of festivals and things like this. And every time I looked at that chair, I kept on seeing Omar in that chair. I think that should have been his place. That would have been great if it was a place. And I kind of had thought about the idea, and I thought this would be really great. And then I had enormous luck so I had the idea, and then I went to Omar with it, thinking that he'll go, oh my God, this is crazy, this won't work. And Omar's just obviously has the same. Well, I think we share very much a similar vision of in our work. I think Omar puts it correctly, about that idea of identity and absence and things like this in images. So I was really lucky enough to have Omar say yes and go on this adventure with him.
So Omar, when Lee approached you with the project, were you familiar with the Anoymous project before he approached you?
Oh yes, I was, because as he was saying, we've been literally neighbors in Paris Photo, and also our galleries are quite friendly with each other. So I was familiar with the project. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it's, you actually have one of Omar's pictures, haven't you, in your home?
I'm a huge fan of Omar's work. I mean, how can you not be? So, I mean, I was lucky enough to as a collector of sorts as well. That's part of my the illness of being an artist. I think it's also being a collector half the time. So that just adds to the pleasure of working with someone that you admire.
The next steps, I guess, were then selecting which pictures you were going to work with. So what was the process there? Was it involved in which ones suggested a sort of how Omar would interact with the people in the photograph, or was it logistical in terms of difficulty of recreating that moment?
No, actually, we didn't think about. We didn't want the difficulty to be a criteria. What we wanted we wanted the whole book to look like a family album, the album of someone who has a normal life in a society where he has his place. So we needed a good selection of, normal moments, from, professional meetings to holiday pictures, party pictures. Yeah.
I mean, we made a big selection of images, but actually then we kind of realized that a lot of the images we were trying to take was just really normal moments of life. Really, we weren't looking. I mean, there are some outstanding ones in I think that stand out, but what we were looking for is really to cover those parts of life from the morning to the evening, going on holiday, eating dinner with the family, just the average family photos. Really needed to cover those bases. So we kind of looked, but it was really the photos that said, "Oh, look, there's the place there's the empty place, there's the place that." And there were some images that just really stuck out, because obviously sometimes you have people looking in a direction and we're like, well, that there'd be an interaction, and I think that was where we played a lot with that. But a lot happened actually. I think we made a selection, and when we got to the shoot, I kind of feel that we kind of put them up like a storyboard, and we would talk through what would happen in the scene and what could happen. And Omar, who kind of looked at the images and then said, well, it'd be great if I was talking to this person, and that kind of happened. So a lot actually happened. The preparation was more technical, especially with the clothes and stuff like this, but a lot happened actually on the shoot itself, which was really the magic of it, is when we started really creating the work, I think, was when we were shooting.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, you mentioned the clothes. You had to find clothes that matched the period that were sort of appropriate. So was that quite a difficult job?
Well, we were lucky to be well surrounded. We had an amazing and fantastic stylist, Alex, who has worked in cinema for years and has worked with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky to have a film crew that's I've worked with Alex for ages, and I know as shooting, there's this incredible place in Paris where they have this amazing stock where someone's collected literally all the original clothing from like
thousands.
I mean, it's incredible. It's like a sort of Alibaba cave of clothing, and so that was a big part of it. Was really, we did a lot of preparation work of trying to find the right clothing for each image, basically, which was a lot. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun as well.
A lot of fun.
I mean, it's like dress. I was like dress up, you know. So basically, we kind of had to find. We had a huge range of clothes that matched the images, and we mixed and matched. But a lot actually happened also on the shoot. So we kind of took clothing that matched each image, and then for each image where we had this huge wardrobe actually on the shoot, we would then find the right tonalities that would go with the image as well. So there was a lot of preparation. You know, like any film, I keep on thinking every time I think about the project, it was really photography meets filmmaking in the sense of a sort of pre-production and planning of the project, and then the magic that happens when you shoot.
Of course, Omar, in your work, you're used to like finding costumes and finding clothes for particular periods, including going right back in history, aren't you?
Yeah, I usually make them or have them made.
Okay.
But this is the first time I actually get in genuine vintage clothes, because generally, you know, I have them made by tailors in my hometown in Dakar, Senegal. So it was a different experience.
I guess the next thing, you have access to a studio, obviously, and I presume you're using a green screen, or I think you said a grey screen.
Yeah, we started with the green and then we went to grey. We realizing that obviously the nowadays what's great is obviously when I was filmmaking, you had to use green or blue because that was the standard, and that's how the computers worked, and you could only map out on those. And then we realized obviously when you use grey, it's a sort of more neutral color to cut out of, and you don't have the reflections of green and blue. But it was very much as it is in when I've been making films and using a lot of special effects. I mean, it's quite strange because I was looking at some of the photos the other day of the actual shoot, and it's, you know, you see Omar in these pictures and you see Omar standing in front of a green screen with a pair of skis or something. It's quite a strange thing to look at. But
when you come to do the shoot itself, obviously the first thing is, I guess, you've got to get the lighting right, haven't you? The lighting has to match the subject. Being a filmmaker, that's a skill that is something that we learn, is to look at a photograph and see where the light's coming from. Is it a hard or a soft light? And then to try and match that in the studio.
Absolutely. I mean, we had a great assistant lighting person who really, Symphony, who was, you know, this kind of thing. You know, this is the sum of many parts. This project. I always feel that we've been carried by an incredible team, which is wonderful. This is why it's almost when I think of it as a collaborative project, it's just not just me and Omar, but more than that. And obviously we would kind of match the lighting on each photo, which was, you know, a real skill to do actually, because, you know, obviously we're in a studio, most of the images were taken outdoors, so we had to match a lot of the lighting. But what's great is that when we were shooting, we would have the camera linked up to a computer where we could very roughly put Omar into the image, so we could see that the position was right and that the lighting was right, and we can make those modifications. I mean, that's great. You know, I keep saying that, you know, this sort of old technology meets new technology, which has made the project very interesting.
Okay, once you've done the shot, then there's the skill involved in that, but also the Photoshop work. That's incredible as well, because it's, when you look at the photographs, you really there's no sense that you've been dropped into that picture. You just look completely like you belong in that shot. And in terms of the grading and everything about it, so talk us through that a little bit.
Well, we were lucky once again. I mean, what's great is that, like you said, on the shoot we could actually map in Omar. And it was pretty amazingly done already. I mean, we could already see that there was the potential was there. But then the wonderful thing that you have against working on an image like this is obviously we're trying to match the angles and also the focal length of the camera to make sure that we were on the same focal length that they were shooting at the time, which was kind of between 35 and 50 millimeter was the maximums they have at the time. They didn't really have anything else. And then basically once we were sure of the shot, then we have our incredible retoucheur, the guy who's doing all the retouching for us at the end, Fred, who I've known for a long time as well, he's a real genius. I think we were blown away by his work, because this kind of work that we kept on saying that we had to kind of really go for the imperfect. What we were looking for was for the imperfections. Obviously, most people are always going towards everything being perfect, and we were trying to go, oh no, that's too sharp, and you have to add in more grain, and if his hand is moving in the photo, it has to be blurred. And so the conversations were quite funny because we were always going against the grain, and sorry the pun, but you know, in that respect, we were trying to put back into the imperfections of the original images.
Yeah. Adding accessories also is something that helped in creating the illusion. So it's not only the clothing, but some elements were also adding on the table or in my hands, or some real vintage beer cans. And so all this participates in the creation of this illusion. And yeah, that
Well,
was.
I think the greatest illusion is that Omar is a fantastic actor as well. So the best thing is that, and because we know each other, that familiarity that when I'm shooting and Omar's looking at the camera and stuff, there was a real moment where it was almost like taking a family photo. I mean, we're in a very artificial, sterile atmosphere, but it was fun. And I think that fun and the idea of having a good time was very important to create the right atmosphere and attitude in the images, which I think is a huge part of the image. Every time I look at the images, it's more the expressions that Omar has that makes the reality seem real. I mean, it sounds strange to say, but it's kind of, that was also a huge part of it.
That's obviously something that you would have been different for you, Omar, is the kinds of poses and the kinds of the self-portraiture you do of your own self-portraiture is very different to in this role where you're still playing a role like you were in your other pictures, but it's a kind of different role. You're fitting into
absolutely, and it's a different attitude, because what I have been doing so far is recreating portraits from a different era where this solemn attitude, staring straight at the painter, like in Baroque paintings or classical painting. It's a different gaze, it's a different attitude. Here I'm looking at a friend and I'm impersonating someone who's looking at a family member. Of course, it's a different setting and it feels different.
Yeah. The expression, I think that what makes it is just your expressions and your interactions with the people in the original photograph is just so perfect, and it's done in I guess it's subtle, it's funny. They're very humorous. They all make me smile. They're all they're kind of funny, but there's also a serious message behind them, and it's sort of subtly funny, but it's also serious. It's very, very, very well done. How you managed to achieve that. It reminds me a little bit, I guess, of it's a kind of a little bit of a photography version of like sort of hip hop music, where you take a piece of music and then you create your own art over the top of it, your own lyrics over the top of the music, background music, and then you create a new piece of art which says something probably completely different to what the original piece of music said that you're using as the base for it. And you've kind of done the same thing where you've taken existing pictures, you've inserted yourself, and in doing so, you've created something completely different that actually has a different message to what the original one did.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we wanted, because we were very much aware of the political dimension of this project, but also we didn't want to be teaching lessons or taking a revenge on history, because honestly, we don't know who these people are, so we can't go on a crusade against anonymous persons. But using the apparent normality of my presence in this image, it just highlights how not normal this would have been. And also it's I think we wanted to make sure that people would not have, how do you say, I'm sorry, I'm thinking in French, but c'est-à-dire le fait que l'humour, c'est un parti pris.
En fait, the humor was something we realized that with humor is probably the best way of getting this type of message across, and I think that is very important. I have always been a huge proponent. I mean, even with Martin, and going back to Charlie Chaplin, something. There is a sort of comically tragic element to these images in some respects. I've always liked very much. I think that balance is often the best, but also complicated to do, to get that right balance. We were very conscious. We discussed a lot. I think we spent a lot of time talking about how we would get that balance right, and that I always say there's nothing more serious than comedy in some respect. This is not a project. We didn't want to preach on it. This is not a project about preaching. This is really a project about it's a conversation. It's a dialogue. That's how we've always approached this work together. I think all our work, both our work separately, whether it's together or separately, I think it's always been about creating a dialogue and creating a conversation and seeing how people react. And I think that's, I think the best comedy is often uncomfortable. It's always that. So it's always that way. So I think that was very much a conscious decision on our behalf.
And as you say, it does highlight in a very clever, subtle way the sort of how different that era was in America, and how out of place Omar is in the photographs, in a way that perhaps if you just look at the photographs without Omar in, you wouldn't even think twice. You think, oh, there's something like 1950s America, whatever. But only when you put Omar in, then it reminds you that this is a very, very selective view of America, and the lives of people in the pictures was very segregated and very. I sometimes think when I look at the pictures, I wonder what the people in those pictures would think if they could come back and see what you've done to them with you in them, and how they would respond to that. I don't know if you've thought that.
Oh, if we could, I mean, we will never know, but that would be
incredible. I mean, that would be that was great. I mean, the funny thing is that when I looked at the pictures and in the collection, obviously I do have African American families, and I have. The thing was that it was obviously the separation, the segregation, and also the separation between them. And I've kind of, but it's something I still think today. I think I still think about. I mean, it's something of the time, but I still feel it's very, very contemporary. And today, I still feel that obviously it's a different timing and things have gone ahead, but we're still not there. And I still think it's something that we should think about today. I think, especially more now, more than ever, that we really need to. When we walk into a room and we sit down and we think and we look around ourselves, it's something that I think it's good to have that in your mind about the world we live in.
So it is still pertinent today, isn't it? It's not just a comment on history.
I think it's a very modern project. I think it's really about. I think the project, we use that world not to comment on that world, but to comment on the world today. Really, I think the commentary is really about today for me.
Yeah,
I think you're absolutely right, Nigel. I think that's
and also I think another objective of ours was to get the reactions, also see how people react when confronted with these images. That is also an objective for us,
for sure.
And we've shown it now so far into art fairs, and the reception is amazing because people always relate to it. I guess it's the material, and not only black and white people. We've also had, people from other ethnic backgrounds who relate to this because it's something that we all have in common, this vernacular photography. So we all can tap into it. And
I think you said to me something that was really interesting, and which I find it's really about this absence of the. And I think there are some images, and Omar said this the other day to me. If you'd put a woman in that, there's and they're all sitting at a pub, and they're only guys in a sort of working man's club type thing. And if you put a woman in that chair, it would also be an interesting perspective. That idea of absence can also transcend lots of different other situations.
But one of the things that's interesting is the use of Kodachrome, because I guess at that time the colour print film also existed. So I'm wondering why people chose to shoot their family pictures on Kodachrome as opposed to having prints. They had to get the projector out and project them, but maybe that was part of the ritual of that period.
I think it's one of those things that's always, I fell in love with Kodachrome from the 50s because the quality is still so. I mean, I still think that sometimes, even if Emma wasn't in the images, the quality of the images is so extraordinary. I mean, that's what kind of attracted me to the project when I started doing the Anoymous project, because I couldn't believe it. But I actually realized that color was really the domain of Kodachrome, and actually people otherwise did black and white prints because color prints were too expensive, and even Kodachromes were expensive. This is very much a middle class society. So, I think it's incredible. One of the comments I had when I started showing the images from like 40s and 50s, people didn't believe thought I'd colorized the images and stuff like this. They said, I can't believe that we're looking at this incredible rich color from the 50s, which was kind of the domain of cinema and Technicolor and stuff like this, but it didn't really translate. But it was very much the first real kind of jump into color photography was Kodachrome. And I mean, Kodak invented this incredible system, which was, and don't forget, the images were made to be projected. They weren't made to be printed. So, I mean, most of the images, I will say that when I print them up and I show them in an exhibition, I actually see them for the first time a lot of time with the public, which is always strange. So, and I'm always amazed how the quality comes out.
So I guess the people in the pictures are kind of self-selecting in a way, because they're the kind of people that would have projectors and a space to have that sort of home cinema kind of experience.
I mean, that's why. I mean, that's quite a cinematic experience, Kodachrome, and I think and there's a very three-dimensional feel to Kodachrome images. I always feel there's just such depth. I think that's why when we started shooting with Omar, there was a thing that we did. We started shooting the first day, and Omar was always in the foreground, and then we kind of realized that it would be great that if he was in the background. So we started to switch to images where Omar started ending up being a kind of just part of the image, but kind of in the background, which I some of my favorite images of those ones as well.
Too.
Yeah.
They really feel like windows into an actual life. They feel like movie stills.
Yes, they do actually. That's a very good description. Actually, they are very cinematic. Do you have any favourites?
What's your favourite, Nigel?
Yeah.
I love the one of the people in the Hawaiian shirts where you're in the middle with the cigarette. But you're the only person looking at the camera, and everyone is chatting amongst themselves, and you've got this kind of like knowing. It's almost like a joke between yourself and the viewer that's going on. That's one of them. And the one where the skiing one is quite funny, I think, as well. That's a great one. The one where there's a table and you're at the front and you're turning back on your chair and looking towards the camera, and it's kind of like a fourth wall kind of moment. The car one as well is which is your cover of the book, isn't it?
I think it might be our favorite because it tells the story of.
Well, it's also it's the only image that I'm actually in as well. So that's actually me and Omar on the car together, and I think that's kind of like, because I love that idea of us. I always look at that image and see us having this conversation about the project and talking about, hey, I think I've got this great idea, and we're discussing the project, and it's also this kind of journey we went on together. As you have to remember, it's also two artists working together, and it was a real journey, an experience to go on together, which is something that I feel very strongly about. Which is why I'm not one for being in front of the camera, so I'm always quite shy. I would only do it with Omar because it's the only person I feel comfortable sitting in front of the camera with. But it was very much that feeling that we went on this adventure together and on this kind of road trip together. I think there's one thing that I really like is there's ones where, like you said, Omar's the only one looking at the camera and everyone else is talking, and sometimes everyone else is looking at the camera and Omar is not looking at the camarea.
Like when you're loading the roll of film in the camera or playing with the camera, isn't there? When you're
I like that. Yeah, we wanted to also pay. We really wanted to pay a bit of an homage to the photographers of the time as well, because they're kind of the unsung heroes of a lot of the work. So
and I think you talked about the graduation when we were at the time, the graduation photograph. That's another example, I guess, where you're kind of in the background. But for you, I think that was one of your favourites, Omar, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, because it also tells the story of privilege. That generation of young men has then led the society, and it just shows how long it takes, how long progress takes. It's sometimes it takes generations, and it just shows how urgent it is for everybody, for us to make sure that next generations have access to the same opportunities, because otherwise we're just repeating le déséquilibre.
We're just repeating the same kind of story of inequality. So
Do you have any other favourites?
You mentioned the one at the ski, because at that time I was actually learning how to ski. I grew up in Senegal, in Dakar, and skiing is a new thing to me, and I absolutely love it. But it was funny how in the picture I looked very unsure of where I'm going with the skis, and in actual life it was also what was happening. It reminds me of my first lessons with my father-in-law skiing. So art meets life.
Funny enough, that was one of the images that kind of flew off the shelves in some respects. That everybody loved that image, and I think that you said it's more absurd in some respects than any of them as well. Especially with all that kind of white snow there, and that kind of like, and we're looking back at the camera and going, let's go. So I think that's also I think the beauty of this type of photography is that, which I've always loved about amateur photography, is that when you're looking at when they're looking at the camera, that they're looking at a family member, or you're looking at a friend or something like this, and there's that kind of emotional contact with the photographer, which you get in amateur photography, which you don't get in professional photography often, which I think is sometimes very interesting. And I think it's a very pure reaction in photography. It's a very honest it's probably the most honest photography. It's family photography in some respects, because you take photography just to say, I want to remember this moment, or I love this person. So,
I guess that's the thing to point out as well, is that obviously, and as it's mentioned in the forward to your book, you can look back at these photographs and apply a sort of political and social interpretation of them. But the people in the pictures at the time, they were thinking, that was not in their minds. They were just taking a picture of granddad or a picture of the kids that stood here, sort of thing. And it's only afterwards, often when you look back, then they take on a different context. How long did the project take altogether from the time you started till getting the finished work?
A bit more than a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you do multiple shoots in the same day, or it wasn't like one shoot per session?
Multiple.
Yeah.
I wish we had the luxury and the finance to kind of spend that time. But you know what? That was kind of the beauty. I think it kind of added to the idea that we were taking snapshots. If we'd over prepared them and over produced it and overshot it, it wouldn't be what it is. I think it wouldn't be what it is. I mean, it's. I think that was also that idea of being very instinctive and very fast. Mm-hmm. I think there was ones where we just took one photo and I went, "That's it," and we looked at it and then there was ones where we spent quite a few hours on.
Yeah.
So that was. I think it was great to have that confidence, especially from Omar, when we were looking at the images and going. We looked at each other and go, "Yeah, that's the one," and stuff like this. So,
that's great. So your book is out. Being there. It was released in France first. Is that correct? I know it's in both languages. It's in French and English, isn't it? The text.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's in terms of distribution. It's been we're lucky because it's sold out very quickly, and then we're on the second edition already, which is doing well, which is great news for us. And it's in obviously it's now going to be distributed internationally, but it can be bought online these days. This is how people do these things.
Yeah. Are people able to, if they really love these pictures and want to buy them pictures for themselves and have them on? Are you selling them as prints?
Yeah, as you saw, we were at Photo London selling our wares, but we have one. What was lucky is also this is a story about our galleries, because we both have separate galleries, and our galleries work together on this project, and they've fallen in love with each other as well, which is and they work together on promoting the project as well. So that's been great, and obviously the prints have been we're lucky that that quite a lot of them are sold out already, and we've sold, as you saw them on the wall, they're sold like in those Kodachrome frames. Decided that would be the one size. I mean, we really wanted them to be seen this way. We realized that the size was important, that that they had a size that was kind of intimate enough to feel like an album photo, and then stuff like that. So they are our galleries.
Okay, well, we'll have the details in the description for people who want to buy the book or the prints, so that people just look in the description. Thank you so much for your time. I hope the viewers enjoyed this video, found it interesting, and enjoy the photographs, because they are fantastic. It's very incredibly clever, but also, as you say, with great humour. So well done on that book, and I look forward to seeing your next work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nigel. It's been a pleasure.